Hi there, friend. Today, we're going to embark on an incredible journey into the world of the Vikings, those fearless seafarers, warriors, and explorers of medieval Scandinavia. When you hear the word Viking, what comes to your mind? Do you picture massive longships cutting through icy fjords, fierce warriors wielding axes and swords, or perhaps the cold, rugged landscapes of the north? Let's take a moment to imagine ourselves there, the bitter wind biting at your cheeks, waves crashing against the wooden sides of a dragon-headed ship, and the horizon stretching endlessly ahead. Can you feel that mix of fear and excitement? The thrill of standing on the edge of the unknown? Now, imagine a Viking village on a steep hill by a winding river or a fjord. Longhouses made of dark timber with thatched roofs stand in rows, smoke curling from their central hearths into the gray sky. The smell of wood smoke, roasted meat, and fresh bread fills the air. Children run between the houses, laughing and playing with dogs, while chickens peck at the ground. Women are busy preparing meals, weaving fabrics, and tending to household chores. Men work on ships, sharpen tools, train with weapons, or prepare for journeys across the seas. Everything in this village is connected. The rhythm of life, work, and survival. Can you imagine living in such a place? Would you feel exhilarated or overwhelmed by the harshness of everyday life? Life in Viking society was structured, though perhaps differently than in other medieval societies. At the top were kings and chieftains, men who commanded respect, led raids, and decided the fate of their people. Below them were free farmers and skilled craftsmen, men and women who owned land, built ships, forged weapons, and trained their children in the skills of survival and combat. Then there were the thralls, or slaves, who had little freedom and were often captured during raids or born into servitude. Consider this. In a Viking village, your birth could determine your entire life path. Does that thought make you feel the weight of destiny or the injustice of chance? Let's step inside a longhouse. These were not simple dwellings. They were multifunctional spaces designed to accommodate entire families and their animals under one roof. Inside, the central hearth provides warmth and a place to cook, while smoke rises through holes in the roof, creating a perpetual haze. Wooden tables, benches, and storage chests line the walls. The floors are packed earth, covered with furs for comfort. Imagine preparing your meals over an open fire, tending to the animals at your feet, and listening to the conversations of your family members. Every sound, every scent, every movement is part of the life rhythm. How would you handle such a daily routine, far from the comforts of modern life? Children were trained from a young age to take on responsibilities. Boys learned to handle weapons, hunt, and navigate the seas, while girls were taught to manage the household, care for animals, and eventually participate in trade or even defense if necessary. Education was practical and oral. Stories, myths, and sagas were essential to passing knowledge, morals, and history. Imagine sitting by the hearth at night, listening to tales of Thor's mighty hammer, Odin's wisdom, or Loki's cunning tricks. Which story would capture your imagination first? The Vikings were extraordinary craftsmen. Shipbuilding was an art form. Long ships were marvels of engineering that allowed for speed, agility, and flexibility in both rivers and open seas. Weapons were finely made, often passed down through generations, with intricate designs and inscriptions. Even everyday tools, from cooking implements to farming equipment, were crafted with care and precision. Can you picture the pride of a craftsman watching his ship glide through the waters for the first time, knowing it could carry warriors to distant lands? Food was both simple and vital. They relied heavily on grains, fish, meat, dairy, and preserved foods. Special occasions were celebrated with feasts, where the community gathered to share meals, songs, and stories. Drinking horns were used not just for mead or ale, but as symbols of status and participation in communal rituals. Imagine raising a horn to honor the gods or the accomplishments of a neighbor. What would that feel like? Religion shaped every aspect of Viking life. They worshipped gods such as Odin, Thor, Freyja, and Tyr, seeking guidance, protection, and favor. Rituals, sacrifices, and festivals were not just spiritual. They reinforced community bonds and social hierarchies. Before battles or sea voyages, ceremonies were held to ask for divine support. Imagine the tension and anticipation of a crew preparing for a raid, offering small tokens to the gods, hearts full of hope and anxiety. Would you trust in the gods, or rely solely on skill and courage? Friend, as you absorb these details, ask yourself, would you have thrived in such a world? Or would the harshness of the climate, the constant need for survival, and the uncertainties of life overwhelm you? The Vikings were resilient, inventive, and deeply connected to their environment and each other. Their legacy is not only in the myths we tell, but in the skills, exploration, and cultural exchanges they initiated across continents. Now, take a moment to consider the broader picture. Every longship, every hearth, every tale passed down was part of a vast network of knowledge and tradition. Their settlements were more than mere homes. They were centers of learning, trade, and culture. From the weaving of fabrics to the crafting of swords, from raising children to planning raids, everything was interconnected. Imagine living within this intricate web of life, where every action mattered. And that's just the beginning of our journey, friend. Soon, we'll sail with them across stormy seas, witness their battles, trade with foreign lands, and explore the myths and legends that shaped their world. But for now, let's pause and reflect. What part of Viking life intrigues you most? The daily routines, the craftsmanship, the children's education, or the spiritual rituals? Can you picture yourself stepping into this world, even just for a day? Hi again, friend. Let's step deeper into the daily life of a Viking village. Imagine the sun rising over the misty hills, its light reflecting on the frozen river as smoke from the longhouses spirals into the crisp morning air. Farmers and herders are already at work, men plowing the fields with oxen, women carrying baskets of grain or milk. You can hear the clatter of wooden tools, the lowing of cows, and the chatter of villagers preparing for the day. Life is harsh, yet structured, and every task contributes to the survival of the community. The Vikings celebrated many festivals throughout the year. During Yule, the midwinter festival, families would gather to share a feast, light fires, and exchange gifts. Songs and stories filled the halls, recounting the deeds of gods and ancestors. Imagine sitting on a wooden bench, listening to a skald recite a saga, your hands warming by the fire, and the smell of roasting meat filling your senses. Can you feel the mixture of warmth, anticipation, and the awe of connecting with stories passed down for generations? Daily chores were endless. Women would spin wool into threads, weave tapestries, and sew clothing for the family. Men repaired tools, sharpened weapons, and maintained the longships that would carry them across treacherous seas. Children helped in small ways, feeding animals, carrying water, or gathering firewood, learning practical skills necessary for survival. Every action, no matter how small, contributed to the larger rhythm of life. Ask yourself, friend, could you manage such a life where every day is a lesson in responsibility and resilience? Vikings also valued storytelling, music, and games. Evenings were often spent around the hearth, with villagers singing songs, reciting poems, or playing simple games that tested agility and strategy. Music was created using stringed instruments like the lyre, or simple flutes, carved from bone or wood. The stories, whether about gods, heroes, or tricksters, served as entertainment, moral instruction, and historical record. Imagine the laughter, the suspense, and the sense of belonging as everyone listened intently to the skald's voice echoing in the longhouse. Friend, consider the contrast between work and celebration. Life was demanding and survival uncertain, yet the Vikings found joy and meaning in community, tradition, and ritual. Can you imagine feeling that strong sense of connection every day, knowing your skills, your courage, and your stories mattered to your people? Children in a Viking village were immersed in learning from the moment they could walk. Boys practiced with wooden swords, learning the movements and strategies they would need to defend their families or take part in raids in the future. Girls learned to spin wool, weave cloth, and manage household affairs. But they were also trained to handle unexpected challenges, including defending the home if necessary. Imagine a boy learning to aim a bow, feeling the tension in the string and the weight of the arrow, or a girl crafting intricate patterns in wool while stories of gods and heroes fill the air. Which would you have enjoyed more, the physical training or the intricate handiwork? Apprenticeships were common for older children, A boy might work alongside a blacksmith, learning to forge iron into tools or weapons, while a girl might study under a skilled weaver or healer. These early lessons were not merely about survival, they were about developing skill, patience, and pride in one's craft. Every creation, every skill learned, contributed to the well-being of the community. Imagine the satisfaction of holding a finely forged axe, knowing it could help provide food, defend the village, or become part of your legacy. Viking society placed a strong emphasis on storytelling and oral tradition. Children were taught sagas from a young age, memorizing tales of gods, heroes, and historical events. These stories were not only entertaining, but served as moral and cultural instruction. Can you picture gathering around a fire at night, listening to a skald recount the cunning of Loki or the bravery of Thor, feeling both fear and wonder as the tale unfolds? The power of these stories shaped how children understood courage, honor, and responsibility. Creativity extended beyond storytelling. Many children were encouraged to participate in music, crafting simple instruments, or singing alongside adults. Art and decoration appeared on everyday objects. Wooden bowls, shields, and textiles bore carvings, patterns, and symbols meaningful to the family or community. Imagine your own hands decorating a shield that might one day protect your village, or a tapestry telling the story of your ancestors. How important do you think it would feel to leave a mark that lasts beyond your own lifetime? Education in practical skills, art, and story created well-rounded individuals. By adolescence, Viking children could navigate rivers, recognize edible plants, hunt, and contribute to the construction or repair of ships. They learned not just by instruction, but by observation, imitation, and participation. Every moment of daily life was a lesson. Now, think about it, friend. How would you feel growing up in a world where your lessons were directly connected to survival, legacy, and the community? In a Viking village, craftsmanship was the heartbeat of daily life. Every tool, weapon, piece of clothing, or household item had to be made with care and skill, because survival depended on it. Imagine walking past a blacksmith's forge. Sparks fly from the anvil as the hammer strikes red-hot iron, shaping it into a sword, an axe, or a plowshare. The rhythmic clanging echoes through the village, mingling with the sounds of hammers on wood, looms clattering, and the murmur of conversations. Could you feel the energy, the intensity of concentration, the pride each craftsman carried in every piece they made? Shipbuilding was perhaps the most revered craft of all. Longships were masterpieces of engineering, designed to glide swiftly over open seas and shallow rivers alike. Villagers worked together for months to carve planks from oak, shape them with precise curvature, and assemble the keel, ribs, and planks into a vessel that could carry warriors, families, and goods across unknown waters. Imagine standing at the shore, watching a newly completed longship slide into the fjord, feeling the excitement and fear that it might soon carry its crew into dangerous, uncharted lands. Would you be part of the team building it, or the crew ready to embark? Woodworking extended beyond ships. Carvings adorned doorways, shields, household items, and even jewelry. Each motif carried meaning, representing gods, family history, or protective symbols. Imagine holding a carved wooden bowl depicting a scene from a famous saga. The grooves of the design still rough to the touch, but filled with centuries of storytelling tradition. Every object was both practical and symbolic, blending function with artistry. Textiles were another realm of creativity. Women spun wool into thread, dyed it with natural plants, and wove intricate patterns into clothing and blankets. Some textiles bore symbolic designs that told a story or indicated the family's status. Picture a girl carefully threading the loom while a story of Thor's exploits is being recited nearby. Her fingers work in rhythm with the narrative, weaving culture into every fiber. Can you imagine the patience and skill required, and the pride when the final piece is completed and displayed in the longhouse? Music and oral tradition played a critical role in shaping the culture of the village. Stringed instruments such as lyres, simple flutes, and drums were common, often played during feasts, storytelling sessions, and ceremonies. Skalds, poets, and bards composed verses celebrating gods, heroes, and local events. Imagine the warm glow of a fire as villagers gather, listening to a skald recount a tale of Odin's wisdom or Thor's mighty deeds. The room is alive with emotion, suspense, and awe. Could you feel the same sense of wonder? Understanding that these stories were also a form of education, passing down lessons in courage, loyalty, and community values. Trade and practical innovation were central to Viking life. Smiths, carpenters, and weavers often collaborated to create items for both local use and long-distance trade. Vikings didn't just produce for survival, they innovated, experimenting with new techniques in metalwork, ship design, and textiles. Think about the pride of a craftsman whose tools or products traveled to foreign lands, introducing Viking skill and artistry to faraway cultures. How exciting would it be to see something you made being used hundreds of miles away? Even architecture reflected cultural values. Longhouses were designed to withstand harsh winters, strong winds, and heavy snow. They were functional yet communal spaces where multiple families could live together, share meals, and collaborate on tasks. Inside, the arrangement of the hearth, benches, and storage showed careful planning, balancing comfort with practicality. Imagine the warmth of a well-kept longhouse during a storm, the smell of smoked fish, and the low hum of conversation. How would you feel surrounded by the strength, warmth, and resilience of such a home? Vikings also infused everyday life with ritual. Before beginning a significant project, whether building a ship, forging a sword, or planting a field, offerings were made to gods such as Odin for wisdom, Thor for protection, or Freya for fertility. A craftsman might carve a small symbol into his creation, believing it would carry divine favor. Imagine the concentration and reverence in these moments, blending work, faith, and artistry into one act. Do you think you would have felt the same connection between your labor and spiritual belief? Friend, consider this. Every object crafted, every song sung, every story told was a thread in the fabric of Viking society. Their culture was not just survival, it was a complex system of art, craft, ritual, and knowledge, passed down and refined through generations. They valued skill, creativity, and endurance, understanding that their way of life depended on both physical and intellectual mastery. Imagine walking through the village, observing each task, hearing each story, and feeling the rhythm of this world. Would you have been fascinated, inspired, or intimidated by such a life? By adolescence, many Vikings were already competent in multiple crafts, trained in practical skills, and familiar with cultural traditions. Boys might help in forging weapons while learning the tactics of battle, and girls would assist in weaving and preparing feasts while learning household management and the symbolic significance of objects. Everyone contributed, and the value of labor was understood by all. Imagine the pride of a teenager finishing his first finely crafted sword, or completing a tapestry that tells the story of the family's history. How empowering would that feel? Viking religion and mythology were at the very core of their daily existence, shaping how they understood the world, made decisions, and interacted with one another. Their pantheon of gods was vast and complex, with Odin, the all-seeing god of wisdom and war, Thor, the mighty protector wielding his hammer, Mjolnir, Freya, the goddess of love, fertility, and war, and many others whose domains governed the forces of nature, fate, and human endeavor. Imagine living in a world where every thunderclap, every calm sea, every birth and death was interpreted as a sign from the gods. How different would your perception of the world be compared to our modern scientific view? Rituals and sacrifices were deeply integrated into Viking life. Before a battle, warriors would make offerings to Odin, asking for courage, strategy, and victory. Farmers would honor Freya and Freyr to ensure fertile lands and abundant harvests. Festivals marked seasonal changes, such as Yule in midwinter, celebrating the rebirth of the sun, or the spring blots, dedicated to fertility and prosperity. Villagers would gather around large fires, animal sacrifices were made, and symbolic gifts were left to the gods. Can you imagine standing among a crowd, sensing the heat of the flames, the smoke curling into the air, the chanting of prayers, and the solemnity of each action? How might you have felt, knowing the success of your village, and even your own survival, could be linked to divine favor? The Vikings' worldview was also deeply intertwined with fate. They believed in Wyrd, the concept of destiny, which guided lives from birth to death. Courage, honor, and loyalty were not just moral virtues. They were necessities for achieving a favorable place in the afterlife. Those who died bravely were said to be taken to Valhalla, Odin's great hall, where they would feast, fight, and prepare for the ultimate battle at Ragnarok. Imagine a young warrior preparing for a raid, knowing that his death could earn him eternal glory. How would that affect the way he faced danger? Would it make him fearless, or perhaps aware of the thin line between bravery and recklessness? Stories and myths were passed down orally, forming the rich tapestry of Viking culture. Sagas recounted the exploits of gods, giants, and legendary heroes. Tales of Thor battling Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, or Odin sacrificing his eye for knowledge, were not mere entertainment. They were educational, teaching lessons about morality, courage, cunning, and the consequences of one's actions. Imagine sitting by the fire, listening as a skald dramatizes each scene with expressive gestures and changing tones. Can you feel the suspense, the fear, the awe? Could you imagine yourself learning life's most important lessons through these vivid stories rather than written texts? Viking beliefs were not confined to the spiritual. They were practical, guiding decisions in warfare, trade, and exploration. Before a sea voyage, offerings would be made to ensure safe passage. Runes carved into wood, stone, or metal often carried magical significance, believed to protect travelers, heal the sick, or influence outcome. Imagine the sense of connection and security a Viking might feel holding a small rune, feeling the carved symbols warm under their fingers, trusting it would aid them on their journey. How would that reliance on spiritual objects shape your perception of danger and opportunity? Festivals and communal rituals reinforced the bonds of society. During these gatherings, songs, dances, and dramatic reenactments of myths were performed. Villagers wore symbolic clothing or masks, sang songs praising the gods, and competed in games that tested strength, endurance, and cunning. These events were not only religious, but social, creating cohesion and a shared understanding of values and history. Imagine being part of such a festival. The sounds, the smells, the laughter, and the solemn moments all blending into one powerful experience. Would you feel part of a larger story, or simply an observer of a distant tradition? Odin, the god of wisdom, was especially important for leaders and warriors. He was associated with magic, knowledge, poetry, and war. Warriors often made personal offerings to him before raids, hanging small charms, dedicating songs, or recounting vows. Thor, the hammer-wielding protector, represented strength and courage. He was believed to defend both gods and humans against chaos and destruction. Freya, powerful and multifaceted, could guide fertility, love, and even destiny in battle. The interplay between these deities provided guidance and structure in every action, and their stories explained natural phenomena, human behavior, and cosmic events. Imagine the richness of a society where mythology, morality, and practical knowledge were inseparable. How would that shape your sense of responsibility, courage, and creativity? Vikings also had beliefs in supernatural beings beyond the gods. Elves, dwarves, and spirits of the land, sea, and ancestors. These entities were respected and feared, influencing where to settle, how to hunt, and even how to build homes or boats. Special stones, amulets, or offerings could appease these spirits, showing reverence and securing protection. Picture a craftsman pausing to leave a small token on a ship under construction, believing that unseen forces would aid in its safe journey. Can you feel the care and mindfulness embedded in even routine actions? These myths and rituals were not static. They evolved as Vikings encountered new lands and peoples. Cultural exchange, trade, and exploration introduced new ideas and objects, enriching their belief system. Imagine traveling along rivers into distant lands, encountering different gods, spirits, and customs, and reflecting on how these new experiences fit with your own traditions. How would you reconcile familiar beliefs with foreign ones? Would you adapt, resist, or blend them into a new understanding of the world? Friend, take a moment to consider the scope of Viking belief. Their religion was not a separate aspect of life. It was woven into farming, raiding, crafting, storytelling, family, and leadership. Every action was influenced by gods, spirits, and destiny. Could you imagine living in such a world, where every choice carried spiritual weight, and every success or failure reflected divine favor or disfavor? This is how Vikings understood their universe, their place in it, and the legacy they would leave for future generations. Women in Viking society held roles far more significant than many might assume at first glance. While men were often at sea or on raids, women managed households, farms, and even the economic aspects of villages. They ensured the survival and prosperity of the community, overseeing food storage, livestock, and trade. Imagine a woman in the longhouse, coordinating her family's daily activities, supervising children, preparing meals, and simultaneously managing crafts or trade goods. Could you imagine the multitasking and leadership required to maintain order and security in a village while your husband or brothers were away for months at sea? Some women owned property and wielded legal rights uncommon in many other parts of medieval Europe. They could inherit land, negotiate marriages, and even act as arbiters in disputes. Picture a woman sitting with other villagers, settling conflicts between neighbors, or organizing collective work on a farm or construction project. Her decisions affected the well-being of many, demonstrating authority, wisdom, and foresight. How would you feel having such responsibility at a young age, knowing your judgment could shape the future of your community? Women also contributed directly to defense. In times of attack, they were trained to handle weapons, protect their homes, and coordinate defenses alongside male relatives. Imagine the tension of a Viking village under threat. Women reinforcing doors, preparing boiling water, or arming themselves with axes. The courage and composure required were immense. Friend, could you imagine standing on the threshold of your home, ready to defend it, knowing that the lives of children and neighbors depend on your skill and bravery? In addition to their practical roles, Viking women were keepers of culture and tradition. They played a central part in education, storytelling, and the oral transmission of sagas and myths. Mothers and grandmothers taught children the stories of gods, heroes, and ancestors, instilling values of courage, loyalty, and ingenuity. Imagine a grandmother sitting by the hearth, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of a tale about Freya or a legendary Viking warrior, while children cling to every word. How powerful would it feel to shape young minds and transmit both knowledge and identity through stories? Women's influence extended to commerce and trade. They often managed small-scale production, crafting textiles, tools, or decorative items for both domestic use and external trade. Some women even traveled to trade goods themselves, negotiating exchanges with foreign merchants. Picture a woman walking through a market in a distant settlement, speaking multiple languages, handling money, and bartering for goods. How would it feel to operate in a male-dominated society and still command respect and influence through skill, intelligence, and diplomacy? Viking women could also become legendary warriors. While less common, accounts and sagas tell of shield maidens, women trained in combat, who fought alongside men in battles or raids. They were admired for bravery, skill, and honor, embodying the Viking values traditionally associated with male warriors. Imagine the fearlessness required to stand on a battlefield wielding a sword, raising a shield, and defending your clan against seasoned enemies. Friend, could you envision yourself in that role, balancing courage with strategy and protecting those you love? Marriage and family life were crucial aspects of a woman's role. Marriages were often arranged for alliances, property, or social stability. But within these unions, women exercised significant influence over family decisions, household management, and the upbringing of children. Picture a mother instructing her children in the arts of survival, craft, and moral responsibility, while also guiding her spouse in strategic matters or alliances. How much impact could a single woman have in shaping both her family's future and the broader society? Women also played ceremonial roles in Viking religion. They participated in rituals, offered sacrifices, and led certain seasonal festivals, especially those related to fertility and household prosperity. Imagine a woman carefully preparing an offering for Freya or Thor, arranging symbolic items and reciting prayers. Every movement was deliberate, steeped in meaning, and connected to the fate of the community. Could you feel the weight of spiritual responsibility, knowing that your actions could influence the gods' favor and the survival of your people? The artistry of Viking women was remarkable. Their weaving, embroidery, and jewelry crafting were not only practical, but also deeply symbolic. Patterns often carried stories, family emblems, or protective symbols. Imagine creating a tapestry that narrates the lineage of your ancestors, embedding history, culture, and belief into each thread. How meaningful would it be to know that this creation would endure beyond your lifetime, telling your story for generations to come? Friend, as we reflect on the role of women in Viking society, it becomes clear that they were far from passive bystanders. They were leaders, protectors, educators, artists, and spiritual guides. Their contributions were essential to the survival, culture, and legacy of the Viking world. Imagine walking through a village where both men and women worked side by side, each with vital responsibilities, each contributing to the shared life of the community. Could you feel the sense of purpose, interdependence, and respect embedded in every action? As we reflect on the lives of Viking men, women, and children, and the rich tapestry of their culture, it becomes clear how interconnected every aspect of daily life was. Craftsmanship, storytelling, education, religious rituals, and family responsibilities all wove together to form a society that valued skill, courage, and creativity. Imagine walking through the village again. The clanging of the blacksmith, the rhythmic clatter of looms, the excited chatter of children, the scent of roasted meat, and the soft hum of songs around the hearth. Every detail contributes to a living, breathing culture that is both practical and profoundly meaningful. The Vikings were not just survivors, they were explorers and adventurers. Long before the modern age of exploration, they set out across seas and rivers, venturing into unknown lands in search of trade, wealth, and opportunity. The knowledge and skills honed in the village, shipbuilding, navigation, combat, and resourcefulness, prepared them for journeys that could last weeks or months. Imagine standing on the deck of a long ship, the wind whipping through your hair, the waves rising around you, and the unknown stretching endlessly ahead. Would you feel excitement, fear, or a mixture of both as you faced the vast, untamed ocean? Even their myths and religion played a part in these journeys. Offerings and rituals provided comfort and guidance, while the sagas inspired courage and cunning. Vikings believed that the gods and spirits watched over them, influencing both success and survival. Picture a crew gathering before dawn, offering small charms or reciting prayers, each individual aware of their dependence on skill, luck, and divine favor. Could you imagine the trust and camaraderie required to face such challenges together? Friend, the first block of our journey has taken us deep into the heart of Viking life. We've seen the rhythm of daily chores, the excitement of crafting, the power of storytelling, the spiritual depth of their religion, and the indispensable roles of women and children. We've begun to understand how a society so different from our own created a legacy that still fascinates and inspires us today. As we prepare to follow them across the seas, it's important to remember the foundation that supported every expedition, every raid, and every discovery: their culture, skills, and unwavering resilience. In the next chapter, we will sail with these seafarers, exploring their longships, their navigation techniques, and the astonishing courage required to journey to distant lands. But for now, take a moment to reflect on the lives we've explored. Imagine yourself living in that village, participating in daily life, hearing stories by the fire, feeling the weight of responsibility, the thrill of creation, and the spiritual connection that guided every decision. Can you feel the heartbeat of a world both harsh and beautiful, demanding and rewarding, full of lessons that still speak to us today? The Vikings' relationship with the sea was nothing short of extraordinary. From a young age, they learned to read the wind, the waves, and the skies, understanding patterns that allowed them to navigate vast distances without modern tools. Imagine standing on the deck of a longship, feeling the spray of the North Sea on your face, the wind tugging at the sail, and the endless horizon stretching before you. Every decision mattered. One misread current or sudden storm could mean disaster. Could you feel the tension and exhilaration at the same time, knowing that skill, courage, and intuition were your only guides? Longships were the pinnacle of Viking engineering, designed for speed, flexibility, and endurance. Carved from strong oak and carefully fitted, these ships could traverse deep ocean waters or glide up narrow rivers. The hulls were lightweight yet sturdy, allowing crews to beach them, portage them over land, and launch sudden raids or trade missions. Imagine the pride of stepping onto a newly built longship, knowing it could carry your village's hopes, wealth, and warriors to lands far beyond what you had ever seen. Would you be part of the crew or watch from shore, feeling the pull of adventure? Before every journey, careful preparation was crucial. Supplies had to be gathered: salted meat, dried fish, grains, fresh water, and tools for repairing the ship. Weapons, shields, and personal belongings were packed, each item carefully considered for its necessity and weight. Crews were selected for skill, stamina, and loyalty. Imagine coordinating this effort, knowing that a small oversight could endanger everyone on board. How would you approach such a responsibility, balancing efficiency, foresight, and caution? Navigation relied on keen observation of natural signs, the position of the sun, the color of the sky, bird flight patterns, and the movement of ocean currents all provided vital information. Vikings also used landmarks, stars, and even primitive compasses crafted from lodestone. Imagine peering at the horizon, noting the waves, and interpreting the subtle signs that indicated which direction to steer. Could you trust your senses and judgment in a world without modern maps or instruments? Trade was one of the primary motivations for these voyages. Vikings traveled from Scandinavia to the British Isles, the Baltic regions, the coasts of France and Spain, and even as far as the Middle East. They exchanged furs, amber, and crafted goods for silver, wine, spices, and other exotic commodities. Picture a bustling market in a foreign land, unfamiliar languages, strange customs, merchants examining your goods with suspicion and curiosity. How would you negotiate, build alliances, and ensure fair exchange, relying only on your skills and intuition? Raiding and exploration often went hand in hand. While some expeditions sought wealth or trade, others aimed to assert dominance, secure resources, or respond to conflicts. Villages along coasts and rivers could be surprised by the sudden appearance of a Viking fleet. Long ships, gliding silently under the cover of darkness. Imagine the anticipation and fear on both sides. The raiders ready to strike, the locals scrambling to defend themselves. Friend, could you imagine being part of such a raid? Balancing courage, strategy, and survival instincts. Intense life or death situations. Vikings' maritime knowledge allowed them to discover and settle in distant lands. Iceland, Greenland, and even parts of North America became temporary or permanent homes for Scandinavian explorers. These settlements required adaptation to harsh climates, cultivation of unfamiliar soils, and the establishment of trade networks. Imagine navigating unknown waters, encountering entirely new landscapes, and establishing a foothold where no one from your homeland had ever gone. How would it feel to stand on foreign shores, knowing you were at the forefront of human exploration? Their ships were not just instruments of conquest and trade. They were lifelines, carrying entire communities and their hopes across treacherous seas. Imagine being part of a crew during a storm, working together to bail water, adjust sails, and keep the ship on course. Every shout, every movement, every decision counted. Could you imagine the bonds formed in such intense conditions, where trust, coordination, and courage were vital for survival? Friend, consider how integral the sea was to Viking identity. It shaped their skills, their culture, and their worldview. The knowledge of tides, winds, and currents was passed down through generations, intertwined with stories of gods and heroes. Even mythical elements like the Midgard serpent, which encircled the seas, reflected their awe and respect for the ocean's power. Could you feel how deeply the natural world and the divine were connected in every voyage, inspiring both reverence and daring? Viking voyages were also opportunities for cultural exchange. As they reached new lands, they encountered different languages, beliefs, and technologies. This exposure allowed Vikings to adapt, learn, and integrate new methods into their own culture, from building techniques to agricultural practices. Imagine visiting a foreign settlement, Learning to use unfamiliar tools, tasting new foods, and interacting with people who live in ways completely unlike your own. How transformative would these experiences be for a society so tied to exploration and adaptability? The sea also brought stories, songs, and inspiration. Sailors sang chants to keep rhythm while rowing, recited tales to pass the time, and relied on collective memory to navigate and survive. Music and poetry at sea were more than entertainment. They were practical tools for coordination, morale, and even teaching. Imagine hours of rowing under cold winds, singing to maintain pace, while stories of gods and heroes echo above the waves. Could you imagine the sense of unity and purpose this created among the crew? Friend, the second block is beginning to reveal a new dimension of Viking life, one of adventure, discovery, and interaction with the wider world. From shipbuilding and navigation to trade, exploration, and raiding, the sea was both a challenge and an opportunity. Imagine yourself aboard a longship, feeling the spray of the ocean, the strain of work, and the thrill of venturing into the unknown. Would you rise to the challenge, embrace the uncertainty, and become part of this extraordinary story? Throughout the Viking Age, Scandinavian explorers undertook voyages that would leave lasting marks on history. They sailed along the coasts of the British Isles, the rivers of Eastern Europe, and even across the Atlantic to reach lands previously unknown to Europeans. Imagine being part of one of these expeditions, standing on the deck of a longship, feeling the wind whip your face, the spray of waves on your skin, and the endless horizon stretching in front of you. Could you feel the mix of fear, excitement, and anticipation as you ventured into the unknown, relying solely on skill, instinct, and courage? One of the most famous explorations was to the British Isles. Vikings from Norway and Denmark established settlements, raided monasteries, and forged trade networks. Cities like York in England and Dublin in Ireland became centers of commerce and cultural exchange. Picture the first Viking ship approaching a foreign shore at dawn. The crew scanning for signs of habitation, ready to either trade or defend themselves if confronted. How would you react, friend, knowing that every encounter could lead to wealth, conflict, or both? Vikings also navigated rivers deep into Eastern Europe, reaching the heart of what is now Russia and Ukraine. These expeditions facilitated trade along routes that connected the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, exchanging furs, amber, and slaves for silver, honey, and luxury goods from distant lands. Imagine portaging your ship across a river bend, carrying supplies and crew over land to avoid rapids or obstacles, all while maintaining the cohesion and morale of your party. Could you imagine the physical strength, teamwork, and mental resilience required for such endeavors? The Viking exploration of Iceland and Greenland demonstrates their remarkable adaptability. Around the late 9th century, Norwegian Vikings began settling Iceland, establishing farms, building longhouses, and developing communities in challenging climates. Later, Eric the Red led the colonization of Greenland, creating settlements that survived for generations despite harsh winters and limited resources. Imagine standing on the rugged, icy coast of Greenland for the first time, knowing that your survival would depend on ingenuity, courage, and cooperation. Friend, would you have embraced the challenge or found the isolation overwhelming? Perhaps the most astonishing expedition was the voyage to Vinland, in what is now North America. Around the year 1000 CE, Leif Erikson and his crew sailed west from Greenland, discovering lands far beyond the known European world. They explored forests, rivers, and fertile valleys, encountering unfamiliar flora and fauna. Picture stepping onto these new shores, the sound of the ocean behind you, the scent of dense forests around you, and the unknown stretching endlessly. Could you imagine the mixture of wonder, fear, and determination experienced by these first European explorers? Trade and diplomacy were central to Viking expeditions. In addition to raiding, many Vikings sought alliances and economic opportunities. They traded silver, textiles, weapons, and crafted goods with local populations, navigating the delicate balance between diplomacy and threat. Imagine approaching a foreign settlement with gifts in hand, trying to establish trust with people who have never seen your culture or language. How would you negotiate, communicate, and ensure that both sides benefited from the interaction? Viking raids, often intertwined with exploration, required careful planning and tactical skill. Crews had to navigate unknown waters, select targets wisely, and coordinate attacks swiftly. Speed, surprise, and strategic use of longships were essential. Imagine observing a village from the shore, the crew ready, hearts pounding, as you decide whether to attack, trade, or retreat. How would you handle the moral and strategic decisions in such high-stakes situations? The Vikings' maritime knowledge was complemented by remarkable resilience and resourcefulness. On long voyages, they faced storms, freezing temperatures, disease, and limited supplies. They developed methods to preserve food, repair ships at sea, and navigate without modern instruments. Imagine being at the helm during a gale, relying on observation of the sun, stars, waves, and wind to keep your course true. Could you maintain calm and clarity under such extreme pressure? Exploration was not limited to conquest. Vikings also sought knowledge. They observed new climates, wildlife, and landscapes, learning how to survive and thrive in foreign environments. These observations informed future settlements, trade routes, and ship designs. Imagine recording your findings, teaching the next generation, and influencing decisions hundreds of miles away. How rewarding would it feel to contribute not just to immediate survival, but to the expansion of collective knowledge and legacy? Friend, as you reflect on these expeditions, consider the courage and ingenuity required. Every journey combined physical endurance, tactical skill, cultural sensitivity, and spiritual belief. Vikings were explorers, traders, warriors, and innovators, often all at once. Imagine the sights, sounds, and challenges of each voyage, the anticipation of discovery, and the pride in overcoming unimaginable obstacles. Would you have had the resolve to face such adventures, to step into a world of both danger and infinite possibility? Viking naval expeditions were not only about exploration and trade, they were also about warfare, strategy, and asserting dominance. Coastal villages, monasteries, and settlements often faced sudden attacks, and longships allowed Vikings to strike quickly and retreat before counterattacks could be organized. Imagine the tension as a crew rows silently toward a distant shore under the cover of darkness, oars cutting through cold water, hearts pounding with anticipation. How would you feel, friend, knowing that every movement and decision could determine life or death? One notable example is the series of raids on monasteries in the British Isles. Monasteries were rich targets because of their accumulated wealth, including silver, gold, manuscripts, and food stores. Yet these raids were not mere acts of plunder. They required meticulous planning. Vikings had to choose landing points, assess defenses, and coordinate movements between ships and crew. Imagine the strategic discussions before dawn, the crew listening intently, and the leaders outlining contingencies for every possible scenario. Could you have maintained focus and courage under such pressure? Viking raids were often followed by the establishment of settlements. After conquering a region, Vikings would secure a base, integrate with or subdue local populations, and establish trade networks. This dual approach of warfare and colonization required both martial skill and diplomacy. Picture a newly established settlement, longhouses rising from the earth, markets forming, and local populations interacting with newcomers. How would you navigate relationships between conquerors and the indigenous people, balancing authority, trade, and coexistence? The Vikings' raids were not limited to Western Europe. In Eastern Europe, along the rivers leading to the Black Sea, Vikings, known as Varangians, interacted with the Byzantine Empire and various Slavic tribes. They traded, served as mercenaries, and sometimes waged campaigns, blending commerce with military operations. Imagine traveling upriver, navigating treacherous waters while negotiating with foreign rulers and assessing the risks of potential skirmishes. Could you have managed the complex balance of aggression, diplomacy, and economic opportunity? Naval tactics were sophisticated for the time. Longships allowed rapid movement, shallow draft navigation, and coordinated attacks. Crew members trained to row in rhythm, coordinate sail adjustments, and respond instantly to commands from the leader. Picture the disciplined chaos of a battle at sea. Arrows flying, shields raised, the roar of warriors echoing over the waves. How would you maintain calm, make decisions quickly, and act with precision amidst such intensity? Vikings also relied on intelligence and reconnaissance. Before a raid, scouts would observe villages, and monitor patterns of daily life to plan the most effective approach. Communication between ships, timing, and adaptation to unexpected changes were essential. Imagine gathering this information and translating it into action, understanding that a single miscalculation could lead to disaster. Could you handle the responsibility of guiding others under such high stakes? Despite the violence, Vikings often integrated with local populations. They intermarried, adopted local practices, and participated in trade and political alliances. This interaction demonstrates their adaptability and pragmatism. Imagine navigating foreign settlements, learning new customs, and negotiating trade while remaining aware of potential threats. How would you balance aggression with diplomacy, friend, knowing that both were crucial for long-term success? Major campaigns, such as the raids along the coasts of France, Ireland, and the British Isles, illustrate the scope and audacity of Viking expeditions. Large fleets, sometimes hundreds of ships strong, coordinated simultaneous attacks, demonstrating both logistical skill and strategic vision. Picture the assembly of these fleets. Ships being prepared, crews trained, supplies loaded, and leaders coordinating complex maneuvers. How would it feel to be part of such a massive, high-stakes operation where timing, courage, and skill were everything? Even in defeat or retreat, Vikings demonstrated resilience. Ships were repaired, strategies re-evaluated, and lessons learned from each encounter. This ability to adapt, recover, and continue exploration or conquest was a defining characteristic. Imagine a crew battered by storms or ambushed in a foreign land, yet still managing to regroup, repair their vessels, and continue their mission. Could you maintain morale and focus under such adversity? Friend, as you picture these voyages, remember that every expedition combined elements of exploration, trade, warfare, and diplomacy. Each journey required courage, intelligence, skill, and teamwork. Imagine standing on the shore after a successful raid, watching the longships depart for new lands, feeling pride, exhaustion, and anticipation for the next adventure. Could you have thrived in a world where every day offered uncertainty, challenge, and the possibility of discovery? Vikings' maritime adventures were more than mere survival. They were the backbone of a culture that valued risk, innovation, and adaptability. From the icy coasts of Scandinavia to distant lands across Europe and North America, they left a legacy defined by audacity, skill, and vision. Imagine tracing their roots, following in their wakes, and understanding the courage required to shape history across oceans. How would it feel to step into the life of these legendary seafarers, relying on your wits, strength, and the bonds of your crew to face the vast unknown? As we reach the conclusion of our second block, it's important to reflect on the full scope of Viking maritime activity. Their voyages were not merely adventures across the sea. They were complex undertakings involving trade, diplomacy, warfare, exploration, and cultural exchange. Imagine a fleet of longships departing from a Scandinavian harbor, sails catching the wind, oars cutting through the waves, and crews working in seamless coordination. Each ship represented a blend of engineering mastery, human endurance, and collective ambition. How would it feel to be part of such a coordinated force, knowing that your actions could influence both your community's survival and your own legacy? Viking expeditions combined courage, intelligence, and resourcefulness. Long journeys required careful planning for provisions, navigation, and contingencies. Storms, rough seas, and hostile encounters were constant threats. Imagine being at the helm during a tempest, rain pelting your face, waves crashing over the deck, and the horizon barely visible. Would you trust your instincts and training, rely on the experience of your crew, or feel the thrill of facing the unknown head-on? Friend, could you imagine the resilience required to survive not just the ocean, but the uncertainties of foreign lands? Trade and cultural exchange were equally vital to Viking success. By connecting northern Europe with distant regions, Vikings facilitated the flow of goods, ideas, and innovations. Silver coins, silks, spices, and exotic foods reached Scandinavia, influencing wealth, fashion, and domestic life. Imagine walking through a village after a successful trading expedition, seeing unfamiliar materials and objects from far-off lands, hearing stories of foreign markets, and feeling the excitement of newly acquired knowledge. How would these experiences shape your worldview, your creativity, and your ambitions? Vikings were not only merchants and explorers, they were diplomats. Alliances, marriages, and negotiations often complemented voyages, creating networks of influence that extended beyond raiding. Imagine navigating foreign courts, offering gifts, negotiating trade deals, and establishing agreements that could endure for generations. Could you balance the dual role of assertive leader and respectful negotiator, ensuring both prosperity and safety for your people? Their maritime skills allowed Vikings to establish settlements far from Scandinavia. Iceland, Greenland, and even parts of North America became temporary or permanent outposts, requiring adaptation to unfamiliar climates and landscapes. Imagine building homes, clearing land, and farming in harsh or unknown conditions, learning to survive with limited resources and unpredictable weather. Friend, can you feel the courage and ingenuity required to transform unknown territories into viable settlements, ensuring the continuity of your community? Vikings' interactions with local populations were multifaceted. They traded, intermarried, and sometimes integrated peacefully, while at other times they raided or asserted control. This duality demonstrates their adaptability and pragmatic approach to survival and success. Imagine entering a foreign village, negotiating trade while remaining alert to potential threats, teaching your own customs while learning new ones. How would you balance assertiveness with diplomacy, aggression with collaboration, to achieve your goals? The legacy of Viking expeditions extends beyond tangible wealth. Their voyages spread knowledge, skills, and ideas that influenced future generations. navigation techniques, shipbuilding innovations, and trading practices contributed to the broader development of Europe. Imagine a young apprentice studying a map of rivers and coastlines, learning from tales of distant lands, and understanding that the knowledge of previous generations could guide new journeys. Could you feel the weight and inspiration of continuing this legacy? Friend, think about the human qualities that underpinned these successes. Courage, resilience, teamwork, ingenuity, and curiosity. Every expedition, whether for trade, exploration, or conquest, required these traits. Imagine the camaraderie among a crew navigating unfamiliar waters, the trust placed in each member's skill, and the shared sense of purpose that made survival and achievement possible. Could you imagine cultivating such bonds and relying on them to face the unknown? The cultural and economic impact of Viking maritime activity was profound. Trade routes facilitated the exchange of goods and ideas across continents. Settlements acted as nodes of interaction, blending local customs with Scandinavian practices. Festivals, markets, and daily life in Viking communities were enriched by these influences, creating a vibrant, interconnected society. Imagine witnessing this dynamic, sensing the constant flow of innovation, adaptation, and human creativity. How would you feel living in a world so deeply connected by exploration and commerce? Finally, the Viking legacy reminds us that exploration is both a physical and intellectual endeavor. It requires observation, adaptation, and courage. It demands not just skill in navigation, strategy, or diplomacy, but also the ability to learn from experience, embrace new ideas, and persevere through adversity. Friend, imagine reflecting on your own life with this perspective, seeing challenges as opportunities for growth, collaboration, and discovery. Could you approach your own voyages with the same determination and openness? Life in Viking society was a balance of routine, skill, and adaptability. Daily life depended on the seasons, the demands of survival, and the responsibilities of family and community. Imagine waking at dawn in a longhouse, the smell of wood smoke mixing with the scent of hearth-cooked food, the sound of children stirring, and livestock moving outside. Each day required effort, tending fields, caring for animals, preparing food, crafting tools, and maintaining the home. Friend, can you picture yourself participating in such a rhythm, where every action was crucial to survival and prosperity? Farming was central to Viking life. Most families cultivated grains, vegetables, and herbs, raised livestock such as cows, sheep, and pigs, and supplemented their diet with hunting, fishing, and foraging. Imagine working in fields with rudimentary tools, bending to sow seeds or harvest crops under the ever-changing Scandinavian weather. Could you imagine the physical endurance and knowledge required to predict weather patterns, protect your crops, and ensure the community's food supply? Craftsmanship and technology were highly developed. Blacksmiths forged weapons, tools, and household items, while woodworkers built furniture, boats, and structural elements for longhouses. Textile production, weaving, and embroidery were often handled by women, producing both functional clothing and decorative items rich in symbolic patterns. Imagine the focus required to produce a finely crafted sword or intricately woven tapestry, knowing it could be used in defense, trade, or display. Friend, how skilled and patient would you need to be to master these crafts? Education was informal but essential. Children learned through observation, participation, and oral instruction. Boys and girls were trained in household skills, farming, and, for boys, combat, while older women taught history, storytelling, and cultural values. Imagine a young child watching a parent repair a net, learning the rhythm of stitches and knots, while listening to stories of gods, ancestors, and heroes by the hearth. How immersive and influential would this education feel in shaping knowledge, values, and identity? Religious and spiritual life influenced daily routines. Vikings honored gods such as Odin, Thor, and Freyja, offering sacrifices, prayers, and participating in festivals tied to seasonal cycles. Sacred groves, altars, and household shrines were common, reminding everyone of the divine presence. Imagine preparing an offering at dawn, aware that your actions symbolized gratitude, protection, and connection to forces beyond your understanding. Could you feel the comfort, guidance, and responsibility imbued in such practices? Community bonds were vital. Villages relied on collective labor for tasks like building, repairing, and harvesting. Social cohesion was reinforced through feasts, ceremonies, and the sharing of resources. Imagine working alongside neighbors to construct a new longhouse, the sound of hammers and axes blending with conversation, laughter, and occasional debate. Friend, can you sense the sense of interdependence, mutual trust, and shared purpose that kept Viking society functional and resilient? Viking warfare was sophisticated and highly organized. Warriors trained in various weapons, including swords, axes, spears, and bows, while also mastering shields and defensive tactics. Battles required coordination, strategy, and discipline. Imagine standing in formation, shield to shield, listening to commands, and moving as one unit against an opposing force. Could you feel the focus, adrenaline, and courage necessary to survive and succeed in such encounters? Naval tactics were equally advanced. Longships allowed fast coastal raids, quick retreats, and surprise attacks. Crew members trained in rowing, sailing, and boarding techniques, ensuring precision and efficiency. Imagine the teamwork required to synchronize dozens of rowers, adjust sails in response to wind, and execute complex maneuvers during combat or navigation. Friend, could you imagine the combination of physical strength, coordination, and strategic thinking necessary to master these skills? Viking defense relied on both fortifications and intelligence. Villages, longhouses, and strongholds were designed to withstand attack, and early warning systems were in place to detect approaching threats. Imagine being on a watchtower at dusk, scanning the horizon and signaling the community at the first sign of danger. How would you manage the tension of vigilance, responsibility, and readiness for rapid response? Technology and innovation were integral. Metalworking, shipbuilding, navigation, and agricultural tools reflected centuries of accumulated knowledge. Imagine using an iron plow to break tough soil, a compass or sunstone to guide a ship, or crafting a sword that could withstand battle. Friend, can you picture how ingenuity, observation, and experience combined to give Vikings an advantage in both survival and expansion? Vikings also valued storytelling and art. Sagas, poems, and visual motifs conveyed history, moral lessons, and social norms. Artifacts, carvings, and jewelry displayed skill and status, often telling stories of gods, heroes, or ancestry. Imagine sitting by the fire, listening to a saga unfold, while a carved wooden figure captures the essence of the tale. How would it feel to live in a culture where history, morality, and creativity were woven into everyday life? Friend, daily life in Viking society was a blend of practicality, culture, and resilience. Each member of the community contributed skills, labor, and knowledge, sustaining both survival and legacy. Imagine moving through a village, observing the rhythm of work, the energy of learning, the vibrancy of markets, and the solemnity of ritual. Could you feel the balance between challenge, creativity, and purpose that defined Viking existence? Viking military expeditions were carefully planned operations that required strategy, coordination, and adaptability. While popular culture often portrays Vikings as reckless raiders, the reality was far more complex. Each campaign involved reconnaissance, logistics, diplomacy, and contingency planning. Imagine standing on a hill overlooking a distant settlement, scouting for defenses, supply routes, and escape paths. How would you balance patience, observation, and decisive action, knowing that a single miscalculation could determine the fate of your crew? The composition of Viking forces was also strategic. Warriors were selected not only for strength and skill, but for loyalty, experience, and the ability to operate as part of a cohesive unit. Leaders, or jarls, coordinated multiple ships, assigning roles for scouts, rowers, archers, and close combat fighters. Imagine the complexity of orchestrating dozens of ships, hundreds of warriors, each aware of their responsibilities and each depending on the others. Could you maintain command and clarity under such circumstances, friend, when even minor miscommunication could lead to chaos? Naval tactics were central to Viking success. Long ships were designed for speed, maneuverability, and shallow draft, allowing crews to strike unexpectedly along coasts and rivers. Rowing in unison, adjusting sails, and anticipating wind and tide conditions required coordination and discipline. Imagine the sound of synchronized oars cutting through the water, the leader's voice issuing commands, and the crew responding instantly. How would it feel to be part of this finely tuned system, where precision and teamwork determine the success of every raid or expedition? Surprise was often the most effective tactic. Vikings would land before dawn, approach quietly, and strike swiftly, overwhelming settlements before they could organize a defense. Imagine the tension on both sides. The raiders holding their breath, ready to act, and the inhabitants unaware of the imminent threat. Could you imagine the adrenaline, fear, and calculated risk involved in such a maneuver? Knowing that failure could be catastrophic, fortifications, though less common than in later periods, still played a role. Some Viking communities and target settlements built walls, ditches, or stockades to resist raids. Leaders analyzed these defenses carefully, often deciding whether to bypass, negotiate, or attack. Picture studying a fortified village from a distance, weighing options, and anticipating the enemy's movements. How would you make rapid strategic decisions under the pressure of potential battle? Weapons and combat techniques were varied and specialized. Swords, axes, spears, and bows were used depending on circumstances, with shields and armor providing protection. Imagine wielding a sword or axe, coordinating with a shield wall, and responding to sudden attacks while keeping track of your comrades and opponents. Could you maintain focus and composure amid the chaos of battle, friend? Balancing aggression with strategy to survive and succeed? Archery and ranged combat were particularly effective for harassing enemies before a melee engagement. Skilled archers could disrupt formations, target leaders, and create openings for the infantry. Imagine the precision, patience, and timing required to launch arrows effectively while remaining protected by your shield wall. How would you manage fear, accuracy, and coordination simultaneously? Vikings also used psychological tactics. Fear and surprise were tools of warfare. Sudden attacks, displays of force, and reputation could deter resistance even before conflict began. Imagine the knowledge that your presence alone could influence the decisions of communities miles away, forcing them to pay tribute or surrender resources. Friend, could you wield such influence responsibly, balancing intimidation with pragmatism? Campaigns were not limited to small raids. Historical records describe large-scale operations involving hundreds of ships and thousands of warriors. Coordinating such forces required logistical planning, food, water, equipment, timing, and communication. Imagine overseeing such an operation, ensuring that each ship was supplied, each warrior informed, and every contingency planned. How would you maintain discipline, morale, and efficiency in a force of that scale? Vikings also adapted tactics to the terrain. Coastal raids required fast ships and knowledge of tides. Rivers demanded skill in navigation and portaging, and inland operations required understanding forests, hills, and open plains. Imagine preparing for an expedition where each environment demanded different skills, equipment, and strategies. Could you adjust plans quickly in response to new challenges, friend, knowing that flexibility could mean the difference between success and failure? Sieges, though less frequent than raiding, were complex undertakings. Vikings sometimes faced fortified settlements or cities where direct assault was impractical. They used tactics like blockade, negotiation, and targeted strikes to achieve objectives. Imagine overseeing a siege, analyzing supply lines, enemy strength, and potential vulnerabilities. How would you keep your forces patient, focused, and ready to act when the critical moment arrived? Intelligence gathering was essential. Scouts, informants, and observations provided information about enemy movements, local resources, and terrain. Imagine receiving reports from scouts, interpreting signals, and adjusting strategies accordingly. Could you synthesize multiple sources of information under pressure, friend, turning knowledge into decisive action? Friend, consider how these military activities intertwined with trade, diplomacy, and exploration. A successful raid could secure resources and influence, which could then be leveraged in markets or political alliances. Conversely, failures could jeopardize entire communities. Imagine the balance of risk and reward, courage and calculation in every decision. Could you imagine living in a society where survival depended on both martial skill and strategic intelligence? Beyond immediate conflict, Vikings left a lasting military legacy. Their strategies, ship designs, and combat techniques influenced later European warfare. Shield walls, coordinated naval attacks, and flexible strategies became hallmarks of effective military organization. Imagine analyzing a battle centuries later and seeing the ingenuity and tactics that seemed simple at first glance. How would it feel to recognize the enduring impact of your actions on future generations? Vikings were not only fighters, they were teachers of strategy, innovation, and coordination. They adapted technologies, learned from enemies, and shared knowledge within their communities. Imagine passing on lessons learned from campaigns to apprentices and younger warriors, ensuring that the next generation could navigate both war and diplomacy. Friend, could you appreciate the importance of combining experience with foresight to sustain a society's strength and influence? In summary, Viking warfare was a synthesis of preparation, skill, observation, and adaptability. Every expedition required a delicate balance of planning and improvisation, courage and prudence, strength and intelligence. Imagine being part of a campaign, feeling the pulse of the fleet, the rhythm of rowers, the tension of anticipation, and the exhilaration of action. Could you thrive in such an environment, where every decision mattered and every outcome shaped the destiny of your community? Technology and craftsmanship were cornerstones of Viking survival and expansion. From shipbuilding to blacksmithing, woodworking, and textiles, the Vikings developed skills that allowed them to thrive in challenging environments and engage effectively in trade, warfare, and exploration. Imagine standing in a bustling workshop, the scent of heated metal, sawdust, and tanned leather filling the air. Craftsmen and apprentices working meticulously on items that could serve both practical and ceremonial purposes. Friend, can you picture the level of skill, attention, and ingenuity required to produce tools, weapons, and goods that were reliable, efficient, and sometimes beautiful? Shipbuilding was perhaps the most remarkable technological achievement. Longships combined speed, durability, and versatility, enabling the Vikings to navigate open seas and shallow rivers alike. Each vessel required careful planning, precise carving, and expert assembly of planks, nails, and oars. Imagine a master shipwright supervising a team as they shape timber into a sleek, seaworthy vessel, capable of carrying a crew of warriors or traders over vast distances. Could you imagine the pride and responsibility of contributing to a vessel that might carry your community's hopes and fortunes to distant lands? Blacksmithing was equally vital. Weapons, tools, and household implements demanded not only raw strength, but also intricate knowledge of metallurgy. Swords had to be sharp and resilient, axes balanced for both combat and woodcutting, and iron plows durable enough to break the toughest soil. Picture heating a sword in a forge, hammering, folding, and tempering the metal. Each stroke precise, each decision critical. Friend, could you imagine the patience, focus, and experience necessary to master such a craft, knowing lives could depend on your work? Woodworking permeated everyday life. Longhouses, furniture, tools, and even toys required careful shaping of timber. Carvings were often decorative but also symbolic, reflecting religious beliefs, status, or clan identity. Imagine crafting a chair, a shield, or a chest. Carefully smoothing every surface, carving runes and patterns that tell a story. How would it feel to leave behind objects that are both practical and a testament to your creativity and culture? Textile production was predominantly managed by women, who spun wool, wove cloth, dyed fabrics, and embroidered intricate designs. Clothing was functional, protecting from harsh weather, but also an expression of identity and status. Imagine the rhythm of spinning wool by hand, the concentration required to maintain tension and consistency, and the satisfaction of producing garments that keep a family warm or impress a visiting trader. Friend, could you imagine mastering these skills where precision, patience, and creativity were inseparable from daily life? Navigation technology was subtle but effective. Vikings relied on natural indicators, sun position, stars, ocean currents, wind patterns, and even the flight of birds. They also used primitive instruments such as sunstones to determine the sun's direction on cloudy days. Imagine standing on the deck of a longship, scanning the horizon, interpreting subtle cues in the waves, and adjusting your course accordingly. Could you trust your senses, knowledge, and intuition to guide a ship across hundreds of miles of open water? Agricultural innovation ensured communities could survive harsh climates. Crop rotation, Animal husbandry, irrigation methods, and preservation techniques were crucial. Vikings also adapted foreign techniques they encountered through trade or exploration, integrating new methods to improve yields and sustainability. Imagine planning a farm year, balancing planting, harvesting, and resource storage to withstand winter scarcity. Friend, can you appreciate the foresight, organization, and adaptability required to maintain a thriving settlement? Viking fortifications and defensive technologies combined practicality with ingenuity. Palisades, earthworks, ditches, and strategically placed watchtowers offered protection against raiders and rival clans. Observation and early warning systems were crucial. Picture yourself at a lookout post, scanning the horizon with a trained eye, ready to signal the community of incoming danger. How would you balance vigilance with the demands of everyday life, knowing that the safety of your village depends on your alertness? The integration of technology with social structure was seamless. Craftsmen, farmers, warriors, and traders were all interdependent, each group contributing to the community's resilience and prosperity. Imagine coordinating efforts during a crisis, repairing a damaged ship, tending to crops, defending the village, and managing trade simultaneously. Friend, could you thrive in a society where every skill mattered and collaboration was essential for survival? Tools themselves reflect Viking ingenuity. Axes, hammers, knives, and plows were designed for efficiency and durability. Fishing nets, traps, and sledges demonstrated practical engineering adapted to local geography. Imagine selecting the right tool for each task, knowing that mistakes could waste precious time, endanger lives, or compromise a voyage. How would you cultivate expertise and resourcefulness across so many domains? Friend, technology also intertwined with culture. Decorative motifs, symbols, and practical designs reflected beliefs, identity, and lineage. Even mundane objects carried meaning, reminding each user of their place in a wider social and spiritual framework. Imagine wearing a clasp with a carved rune, using a decorated tool, or sitting on a carved bench, each item reinforcing culture, memory, and values. Could you sense how deeply craftsmanship was connected to daily life, status, and legacy? Innovation and adaptation were key to Viking endurance. They learned from the environments they inhabited, the peoples they encountered, and the challenges they faced. Each improvement in tools, ships, or techniques enhanced mobility, survival, and opportunity. Imagine applying lessons from a failed expedition to improve navigation, storage, or ship design for the next journey. Friend, how inspiring would it be to know that observation, experimentation, and adaptation could directly shape the success of your people? Health, hygiene, and medicine were also informed by observation and tradition. Herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and preventative practices reflected centuries of accumulated knowledge. Imagine tending to a sick crew member, selecting herbs, adjusting diet, and employing careful care. How important would patience, experience, and attentiveness be in maintaining life and health in a challenging environment? Finally, Viking survival strategies were holistic, blending technology, skill, community, and knowledge. Every member of society contributed to resilience and adaptability. Imagine the coordination of a community preparing for winter, ensuring food, tools, protection, and morale. Friend, can you imagine the sense of accomplishment, security, and pride in knowing that your collective effort ensures survival and prosperity? The third block is gradually revealing the Vikings not only as warriors or explorers, but as innovators, craftsmen, and strategists. Friend, imagine walking through a village, observing every activity from smithing to sailing, farming to weaving, and sensing how skill, knowledge, and culture intertwine. Could you see yourself thriving in such a dynamic, demanding, and interconnected society? Daily routines in Viking communities were deeply connected to craftsmanship, religion, and cultural traditions. Each day combined practical labor with social, spiritual, and artistic practices, creating a rhythm that sustained both survival and cultural identity. Imagine waking in a longhouse to the scent of hearth smoke and baking bread, hearing children and animals stirring, and elders preparing for rituals or storytelling. Friend, can you picture the interplay of work, tradition, and learning in shaping daily life and ensuring community cohesion? Crafts and trade were essential. Metalwork, woodworking, weaving, and pottery were not just functional. They conveyed status, skill, and cultural identity. Imagine a blacksmith forging a sword, its edge polished to perfection, each hammer strike echoing through the workshop, while apprentices watch intently, absorbing techniques and lore. Could you imagine the pride and responsibility of creating an object that might serve in battle, be traded abroad, or symbolize family honor? Women played a central role in maintaining the household and producing textiles. Spinning wool, weaving cloth, and embroidering patterns were not only practical, but artistic and symbolic. Imagine watching intricate designs emerge in a tapestry or garment, each motif representing a story, a lineage, or a spiritual connection. Friend, could you appreciate how creativity and craftsmanship were inseparable from everyday survival and social structure? Food preparation was both labor-intensive and culturally significant. Meals were prepared from locally sourced grains, meat, fish, and dairy. Preservation techniques such as smoking, salting, and drying allowed communities to endure harsh winters. Imagine a family gathering around a fire, preparing salted fish, porridge, and bread, while discussing events of the day, or telling tales of gods and ancestors. How important would such shared activities be in reinforcing bonds and passing knowledge across generations? Religious practices permeated daily life. Vikings honored gods such as Odin, Thor, Freyja, and local spirits through offerings, prayers, and seasonal festivals. Sacred sites included groves, burial mounds, and household shrines. Imagine preparing an offering at dawn, selecting the right item, placing it carefully, and saying a prayer for protection, guidance, or gratitude. Friend, can you sense the connection between belief, ritual, and the rhythms of daily life, and how it provided both comfort and purpose? Festivals and communal gatherings reinforced social cohesion. Seasonal celebrations such as Yule or Midsummer included feasts, music, storytelling, and games. Imagine the energy and excitement as villagers gathered to share food, recount heroic sagas, and participate in competitions. Could you feel the joy, camaraderie, and shared identity that bound communities together and strengthened cultural continuity? Education was informal, yet pervasive. Knowledge was passed through oral instruction, apprenticeships, and observation. Children learned farming, fishing, crafting, and combat skills, while also absorbing social norms, history, and religious beliefs. Imagine a child assisting in the fields while listening to tales of gods and heroes, learning both practical skills and moral lessons. Friend, can you see how this immersive approach prepared individuals for both everyday life and extraordinary challenges? Storytelling was central to preserving culture. Sagas, poems, and songs recorded heroic deeds, historical events, and moral lessons. Carvings and decorated objects also served as visual storytelling tools. Imagine listening to a skald recount a saga by the fire, the words weaving images of gods, heroes, and distant lands. Could you feel the power of narrative to educate, inspire, and entertain simultaneously? Music and artistic expression were integral to celebrations and daily life. Instruments such as lyres, flutes, and drums accompanied singing and dancing. Decorative motifs on jewelry, weapons, and household items reflected spiritual beliefs and status. Imagine participating in a festival, the sound of music filling the longhouse, everyone moving in rhythm, and artisans displaying their craftsmanship. Friend, can you imagine the vitality, joy, and shared experience that made life rich beyond mere survival? Health, medicine, and hygiene were managed through observation, tradition, and natural remedies. Herbal medicines, simple surgical procedures, and daily hygiene practices reflected accumulated knowledge and adaptation to environmental challenges. Imagine tending to a sick family member with carefully selected herbs and methods passed down through generations. How important would patience, skill, and attentiveness be in preserving life in a society without formal medical institutions? Travel and exploration shaped daily life for many Vikings. Sailors and traders spent long periods away from home, returning with goods, stories, and knowledge that enriched communities. Imagine welcoming a crew returning from a distant market, hearing accounts of foreign lands, seeing unusual goods, and learning new techniques. Friend, could you sense the excitement, curiosity and adaptability required to integrate these experiences into daily life. Community governance was practical and participatory. Assemblies, or things, allowed free men to discuss disputes, make decisions, and establish laws. Imagine attending a thing, listening to arguments, and participating in decisions that affected the village, region, or even distant allies. How would you balance justice, pragmatism, and social harmony in such forums? Friend, every element of Viking daily life, from crafting to rituals, farming to festivals, intertwined survival, skill, and cultural expression. Imagine moving through a day where work, learning, and social life were seamlessly integrated, where every activity contributed to both immediate well-being and long-term legacy. Could you feel the sense of purpose, resilience, and interconnectedness that defined Viking society? As we conclude this third block, it is essential to reflect on the enduring legacy of Viking technology, craftsmanship, culture, and daily practices. The skills developed by these communities were not isolated. They influenced survival, trade, warfare, and social cohesion. Imagine walking through a village after a long day, observing the fruits of collective effort. Freshly repaired ships ready for voyages, tools polished and stored, food prepared and preserved, and the hum of music and conversation filling the long houses. Friend, can you sense how interconnected every activity was, each contributing to the resilience and vitality of the community? Craftsmanship left a tangible mark on history. Blacksmiths forged weapons that shaped battles, tools that enabled farming and building, and decorative items that expressed identity and belief. Imagine examining a sword that has survived centuries, its blade tempered to perfection, engravings telling a story, and craftsmanship reflecting both skill and culture. Could you feel the pride and responsibility in creating objects that were essential for survival and carried symbolic significance? Woodworking and architecture also reflected ingenuity and adaptation. Longhouses, storage buildings, ships, and furniture were constructed with both functionality and artistry in mind. Imagine walking into a longhouse with carefully carved posts, sturdy beams, and practical yet beautiful furniture. Friend, how would it feel to participate in building or furnishing spaces that combined safety, efficiency, and aesthetic expression? Textiles and clothing were equally meaningful. Spinning, weaving, and embroidery created garments suitable for harsh climates, while also conveying social status and cultural motifs. Imagine the precision required to create a patterned cloth that could endure harsh weather, the time invested, and the pride in completing a garment that was both practical and beautiful. Could you appreciate the patience, skill, and cultural knowledge embedded in each piece? Navigation and shipbuilding reflected the Vikings' mastery over both technology and natural elements. Longships were marvels of engineering, allowing rapid travel, raiding, and trade across vast distances. Imagine the process of constructing a ship. selecting timber, shaping planks, fastening components, and ensuring balance and seaworthiness. Friend, can you envision the knowledge, coordination, and foresight required to build a vessel that would carry people safely across unknown seas? Vikings were also adept at integrating foreign knowledge. Contact with distant cultures through trade, exploration, and warfare allowed them to adopt new techniques, tools, and practices. Imagine learning a new metalworking technique from a distant land and applying it in your workshop, improving local efficiency and quality. How would you adapt external knowledge while maintaining your cultural identity and values? Daily routines, rituals, and festivals were essential in reinforcing cohesion and transmitting cultural knowledge. Imagine a seasonal festival with music, dance, storytelling, and ceremonial offerings where elders share wisdom and children learn skills and values through participation. Friend, can you sense the importance of communal activities in binding the society together, transmitting knowledge, and creating shared identity? Education, though informal, was systematic. Children and apprentices absorbed skills by observation, repetition, and mentorship. Imagine an apprentice learning shipbuilding or blacksmithing, receiving both instruction and tacit knowledge passed down through generations. Could you appreciate the immersive, hands-on approach that ensured continuity of expertise and cultural practices? Health, medicine, and survival strategies were closely linked to technology and observation. Herbal remedies, surgical methods, and hygienic practices were essential for sustaining life, especially during long voyages or harsh winters. Imagine preparing a healing salve, tending to an injury, or managing provisions for a crew at sea. Friend, how would you handle the responsibility of preserving health with limited resources and knowledge? Vikings' military strategies, combined with craftsmanship and technological skill, enabled both defense and expansion. Imagine coordinating a community defense while simultaneously maintaining trade, construction, and daily routines, where failure in one domain could impact the entire group. Could you manage such complexity, balancing immediate threats with long-term sustainability? Trade, both local and distant, reflected cultural sophistication. Goods, techniques, and ideas circulated through markets, voyages, and settlements. Imagine welcoming merchants from distant lands, seeing exotic items, hearing new languages, and learning new customs. Friend, can you sense the excitement and challenge of integrating these experiences into daily life and sustaining cultural growth? The Viking legacy, therefore, was multifaceted. It included tangible achievements in technology, craftsmanship, and architecture, intangible knowledge in navigation, strategy, and medicine, and social cohesion maintained through ritual, education, and shared labor. Imagine reflecting on a society where every member's contributions, from craftsman to warrior to trader, ensured the community's resilience, adaptability, and continuity. Could you appreciate the depth and interdependence of these contributions? Finally, consider the cultural impact across generations. Many aspects of Viking innovation exploration, and craftsmanship influenced societies far beyond Scandinavia. Techniques in shipbuilding, metalwork, and agriculture, along with cultural practices, stories, and artistry, left a mark on European history. Imagine tracing the lineage of an object, idea, or skill from Viking hands to later generations, seeing the ripple effects of ingenuity and perseverance. Friend, can you feel the power of legacy, where every small act of skill, observation, and courage contributes to the wider story of human history? As we close this segment, remember that Vikings were not merely warriors. They were inventors, strategists, educators, and community builders. Their daily lives, technology, and culture were intertwined, creating a society capable of both survival and extraordinary achievements. Imagine being immersed in such a world, learning, adapting, and contributing to a legacy that continues to inspire centuries later. Could you embrace the courage, creativity, and resilience that defined the Viking spirit? The Viking expansion across Europe and beyond was not simply a series of raids. It was a complex combination of exploration, colonization, trade, and cultural integration. Imagine the early Scandinavian coastline. Long ships lined up along the shore, crews preparing for voyages into unknown waters, communities bustling with activity as families saw their loved ones depart for months or years at a time. Friend, can you picture the courage, preparation, and ambition required to set sail with the knowledge that the journey could lead to discovery, wealth, or danger? Viking explorers navigated rivers, seas, and oceans with remarkable skill. Using longships with shallow drafts, they could penetrate deep into continental interiors via rivers that were previously inaccessible to larger ships. Imagine a fleet moving quietly upriver, rowers synchronized, scouts watching for obstacles or enemies, sails adjusted for the lightest wind. Could you feel the combination of precision, endurance, and strategic thinking needed to explore lands far from home? Colonization was a key aspect of Viking expansion. Iceland, Greenland, and even temporary settlements in North America were established through careful planning, resource management, and adaptability to harsh climates. Imagine clearing land, constructing shelters, tending livestock, and navigating unfamiliar terrain. Friend, could you imagine the resilience, ingenuity, and foresight required to establish a settlement in a place where winter could last months and supplies were limited? Trade networks were extended across Europe and beyond. Vikings connected Scandinavia with the British Isles, the Frankish Empire, Byzantium, and even the Islamic world. Imagine receiving silver coins, spices, silks, and exotic goods from faraway markets, and trading local resources in return. How would it feel, friend, to participate in a web of commerce that not only enriched your community materially, but also facilitated the exchange of ideas, technologies, and cultural practices? Integration into European societies was both voluntary and strategic. Vikings often intermarried with local populations, adopted aspects of local governance, and sometimes converted to Christianity. Imagine negotiating a marriage alliance, balancing cultural customs, religious practices, and political interests. Friend, could you manage such complexities, blending your identity with new influences while maintaining your community's traditions? Military expeditions remained important, but were complemented by diplomacy and settlement. Some Viking leaders became rulers or mercenaries within European kingdoms, using skill, strategy, and alliances to influence local politics. Imagine coordinating campaigns, negotiating with foreign rulers, and balancing loyalty, ambition, and survival. How would you navigate these intertwined roles, friend, where power, honor, and pragmatism were constantly in play? Urban settlements evolved as Vikings transitioned from raiding to trading and governing. Towns like Dublin, York, and Novgorod became hubs of commerce, administration, and cultural exchange. Imagine walking through such a town. The bustling markets, the workshops producing goods for local use and trade, the cultural diversity of merchants and artisans, and the mix of languages and traditions. Friend, can you picture the energy, complexity, and cosmopolitan character of these Viking-founded urban centers? Art, architecture, and material culture reflected both Viking heritage and local influences. Carvings, jewelry, longhouses, and ships demonstrated technical skill while incorporating symbols meaningful to both settlers and indigenous populations. Imagine creating or observing a carved wooden panel depicting a mythological scene, blending Scandinavian motifs with elements seen in distant lands. Could you feel the pride and creativity in producing objects that communicated identity, status, and narrative across cultures? Viking settlements also adapted to local climates and geography. In Greenland, for example, they developed specialized farming, hunting, and storage methods to survive long winters. In the British Isles, they combined local building techniques with Scandinavian traditions to create durable, functional homes. Imagine problem-solving daily life challenges, preserving food, maintaining shelters, ensuring health, and organizing labor. Friend, how would you approach adaptation in a new environment while preserving essential cultural practices? Religion played a dynamic role in integration. Some Vikings retained traditional beliefs alongside Christianity, while others fully converted to facilitate trade, alliances, and governance. Imagine balancing ancestral worship with new religious practices, participating in both ritual and social life, and understanding how faith could influence survival, loyalty, and community cohesion. Could you navigate such dual religious identities, friend, maintaining respect for the past while engaging with the present? Exploration beyond Europe expanded Viking influence even further. Travel to the Caspian Sea, Mediterranean, and possibly North America introduced new challenges, resources, and encounters. Imagine coordinating long-distance navigation with limited instruments, relying on environmental cues and accumulated knowledge. Friend, can you feel the tension, excitement, and strategic thinking involved in voyages where every decision could mean discovery or disaster? Cultural exchange enriched both Vikings and the communities they encountered. Language, technology, clothing, food, and crafts flowed in multiple directions. Imagine learning a new technique for metalworking from a distant artisan, adopting culinary ingredients or spices, and integrating these into daily life. Friend, how would it feel to live in a society where adaptation, curiosity, and collaboration were as vital as courage and skill? Viking maritime skill underpinned economic and political power. Longships allowed rapid movement for trade, raiding, and colonization, creating flexibility and influence unmatched by many contemporary societies. Imagine a coordinated fleet delivering goods, messages, or warriors across hundreds of miles with precision and efficiency. Could you manage the logistics, timing, and communication necessary to operate at such a scale, friend? Finally, consider the enduring legacy. Viking influence persisted in language, law, art, urban planning, and maritime technology. Cities, towns, and trade networks established by Vikings became centers of cultural and economic development. Imagine tracing a road, a coin, or a story to a Viking origin, seeing how innovation, courage, and adaptation shaped generations far beyond the original settlements. Friend, can you appreciate how the seemingly ordinary daily tasks of Vikings, crafting, navigating, trading, farming, rippled through history to leave lasting impact? Vikings were not only explorers and settlers, they were also formidable military strategists who shaped the political landscape of Europe. Imagine a Scandinavian leader surveying a foreign coastline, weighing the strength of local fortifications, the potential for alliance, and the risks of open conflict. Friend, can you sense the careful calculation and audacity required to embark on campaigns far from home, where success and failure could mean wealth or ruin? European territories faced repeated Viking incursions, and each raid was carefully planned. Intelligence gathering was crucial. Scouts observed river routes, village defenses, and trade patterns. Imagine receiving detailed reports from scouts hidden along a riverbank, analyzing enemy supply lines, and deciding whether to strike swiftly or wait for a more opportune moment. Could you feel the tension of making life or death decisions based on limited information? Vikings often adapted tactics to their environment. Coastal villages were approached by longships capable of navigating shallow waters, while inland settlements were attacked after stealthy river journeys. Imagine synchronizing dozens of ships, coordinating rowing teams, adjusting sails, and timing landings precisely to maintain the element of surprise. Friend, could you imagine the discipline, coordination, and nerve required for such complex operations? Siege warfare was less common but still significant. Fortified towns required clever strategies, sometimes relying on blockades, targeted strikes, or negotiation rather than brute force. Imagine assessing walls, gates, and the morale of defenders, formulating a plan that minimized casualties while achieving objectives. Could you maintain focus and composure, friend, knowing that every misstep could endanger your entire force? Viking leaders combined diplomacy with military action. Alliances, tribute agreements, and intermarriages strengthened influence without constant warfare. Imagine negotiating with a local chieftain or monarch, balancing threats, incentives, and promises to secure favorable outcomes for your people. Friend, how would you weigh honor, strategy, and pragmatism in such delicate negotiations? Some Vikings became rulers in foreign territories, integrating Scandinavian governance with local systems. Leaders like Rollo in Normandy illustrate the ability to adapt culturally while asserting authority. Imagine overseeing a territory where laws, customs, and loyalties differed from your homeland, requiring both sensitivity and firmness. Could you balance maintaining your cultural identity with adapting to new social and political realities, friend? Battle tactics were sophisticated and highly organized. Vikings employed shield walls, coordinated flanking maneuvers, and combined archery with melee attacks. Imagine standing in formation, shields interlocked, responding to signals, and moving as one unit against a formidable enemy. Friend, can you feel the focus, trust, and physical endurance necessary to survive and succeed in such a situation? Naval engagements were equally strategic. Fleets had to coordinate movements, respond to weather, and execute boarding maneuvers efficiently. Imagine dozens of longships moving in formation, rowers in perfect synchronization, archers providing cover, and commanders making split-second decisions. Could you maintain situational awareness and control under the pressure of both natural and human threats? Vikings also exploited psychological tactics. Reputation, surprise, and the threat of overwhelming force often persuaded communities to submit without direct combat. Imagine leveraging fear and reputation as tools of influence, friend, understanding that perception could be as powerful as actual strength. How would you balance intimidation with ethical considerations and strategic goals? Trade and resource management supported military campaigns. Raids often aimed to secure wealth, supplies, or strategic positions, which then enabled further expansion or settlement. Imagine planning an expedition where logistics, food, equipment, ships, and manpower were meticulously organized to sustain both offensive and defensive operations. Friend, could you grasp the complexity of sustaining long-term campaigns across unfamiliar territories? Integration with local populations sometimes occurred after conquest or settlement. Vikings blended with communities, adopting customs, religious practices, and language while leaving lasting cultural influence. Imagine negotiating the coexistence of multiple traditions, ensuring both social stability and the continuation of your cultural practices. Could you balance adaptation and preservation, friend, in a society where identity and survival were intertwined? Vikings' strategic mindset extended to governance, economics, and social organization. Leaders assessed resources, alliances, terrain, and morale when making decisions. Imagine managing a territory, allocating labor, collecting tribute, and ensuring defense while maintaining the loyalty and welfare of your people. Friend, how would you weigh immediate benefits against long-term sustainability, security, and reputation? Maritime skill was central to both conquest and settlement. Longships enabled rapid deployment, surprise attacks, and supply transport. Imagine coordinating fleets for a large-scale operation, selecting experienced rowers, preparing provisions, and synchronizing movements across rivers, coasts, and open seas. Could you master such logistical and tactical challenges, friend, where every detail could determine success or failure? Vikings' military and colonization strategies left a lasting mark on European history. Cities, trade routes, fortifications, and cultural exchanges established during this period influenced political and economic systems for centuries. Imagine tracing a European city's origins, recognizing how Viking strategy, settlement patterns, and integration shaped its development. Friend, can you appreciate the enduring consequences of these actions on future societies? Adaptation and resilience were hallmarks of Viking expansion. Leaders and communities adjusted tactics, technology, and social organization to succeed in diverse environments. Imagine managing resources, preparing for harsh climates, and learning local customs while maintaining cultural cohesion. Could you, friend, imagine the courage, foresight, and adaptability required to thrive across multiple regions and challenges? In conclusion, Viking military campaigns, colonization efforts, and diplomatic strategies were intertwined with technology, craftsmanship, and social organization. Every success depended on preparation, intelligence, coordination, and adaptability. Friend, can you picture the balance of courage, skill, and strategy that enabled Vikings to leave a profound legacy across Europe and beyond? Vikings were not only conquerors and settlers, but also influential traders and cultural intermediaries. Their ability to navigate rivers, seas, and distant lands created networks that facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. Imagine walking through a bustling Viking market in a foreign city. The smells of spices, the glitter of silver coins, and the vibrant colors of textiles filling your senses. Friend, can you picture the energy, curiosity, and negotiation skills required to thrive in such a dynamic environment? Trade was central to Viking influence. They brought silver, furs, amber, and other resources from Scandinavia, while importing exotic goods such as silk, spices, glass, and coins from the Middle East, Byzantium, and Western Europe. Imagine the meticulous organization needed to transport and exchange these goods over long distances, balancing risk, reward, and logistics. Friend, could you feel the thrill and responsibility of participating in a network that connected distant worlds? Cultural exchange extended beyond material goods. Vikings absorbed languages, artistic styles, religious ideas, and technologies from the communities they interacted with. Imagine learning new metalworking techniques from a Byzantine artisan, adopting decorative motifs seen in Mediterranean ceramics, or integrating foreign agricultural practices into local farming. Friend, can you imagine the creativity, observation, and adaptability needed to merge these influences while maintaining Scandinavian identity? Religious transformation played a significant role in integration. As Vikings settled in Christian territories, some converted voluntarily to Christianity, while others blended local beliefs with traditional Norse practices. Imagine preparing for a religious ceremony that honored both the old gods and new Christian saints, balancing ancestral traditions with social and political considerations. Could you navigate dual religious practices, friend, understanding how faith influenced alliances, governance, and daily life? Urban centers established by Vikings became hubs of commerce, governance, and culture. Cities like Dublin, York, and Novgorod exemplified the integration of Viking and local practices. Imagine walking through such a city, the network of streets, marketplaces, workshops, and ports, the mix of languages spoken, and the variety of goods traded. Friend, can you picture the complexity, organization, and vibrancy of life in these multicultural centers? Vikings influenced local art and architecture. Carvings, runestones, jewelry, and decorative motifs spread across Europe, blending Scandinavian and local styles. Imagine observing a carved stone in a foreign town depicting a Norse myth, its style adapted to regional tastes. Could you feel the cultural dialogue, friend, where ideas traveled alongside goods, leaving lasting impressions on aesthetics and identity? Education and knowledge dissemination were essential for sustaining influence. Skilled artisans, navigators, and administrators trained apprentices and shared techniques with local populations. Imagine instructing a young apprentice in a foreign town, teaching the subtleties of shipbuilding or blacksmithing while adapting to local customs and materials. Friend, can you appreciate the role of hands-on learning in spreading skills and ensuring continuity across cultures? Viking settlements also affected local economies. Markets expanded, infrastructure improved, and new trade routes emerged. Imagine coordinating storage, transport, and distribution of goods while negotiating with local merchants and authorities. Friend, could you manage such complex economic systems, balancing efficiency, diplomacy, and resource management? Military presence continued to support trade and settlement. Fortified towns protected economic hubs and allowed safe passage for merchants. Imagine maintaining a watchtower, patrolling streets, and coordinating defenses to ensure security. while facilitating commerce. Friend, can you imagine the constant vigilance and planning needed to protect a community while encouraging growth and integration? Viking influence on language and law is still evident. Old Norse words entered local dialects, and legal concepts shaped governance in colonized regions. Imagine attending a local assembly, hearing laws debated that combined Scandinavian and indigenous practices. Friend, how would it feel to see your cultural heritage shaping justice and communication in a foreign land? Artistic expression continued to thrive. Music, storytelling, and visual arts preserved Norse myths while incorporating local motifs. Imagine participating in a festival where songs told tales of Odin and Thor alongside local legends, bridging cultural gaps through shared experience. Could you feel the richness and adaptability of a society that could honor tradition while embracing new influences, friend? Religion and ritual reinforced cohesion in diverse communities. Temples, shrines, and sacred sites served as places of worship and social gathering. Imagine participating in ceremonies that honored multiple traditions, creating unity and understanding among settlers and locals. Friend, can you imagine the careful balance of respect, participation, and adaptation required to maintain harmony and spiritual fulfillment? Trade, colonization, and cultural exchange left a lasting legacy across Europe. Viking innovations in navigation, metallurgy, agriculture, and urban planning shaped economies and societies for centuries. Imagine tracing roads, marketplaces, or craft techniques back to Viking origins, seeing how practical knowledge and cultural practices influenced generations. Friend, can you appreciate the enduring impact of these exchanges on European development? Vikings' maritime skills enabled continuous exploration, trade, and cultural influence. Longships connected distant regions, ensuring rapid response to political, economic, and military challenges. Imagine coordinating fleets, managing crews, and navigating unfamiliar waters with precision and foresight. Friend, could you feel the combination of leadership, technical skill, and adaptability necessary for sustained influence across vast territories? The integration of Viking settlers fostered resilience and innovation. Communities adapted local practices, preserved traditions, and cultivated networks for commerce and governance. Imagine balancing the needs of newcomers and indigenous populations, ensuring social harmony, economic prosperity, and cultural vitality. Friend, can you grasp the strategic thinking, negotiation, and foresight required to maintain stability in a multicultural environment? In conclusion, the Vikings' impact on European trade, culture, religion, and urban development was profound. They were not only warriors and explorers, but also traders, diplomats, artisans, and cultural intermediaries. Imagine walking through a city shaped by Viking influence, markets bustling, crafts displayed, languages mingling, and traditions preserved while adapting to new contexts. Friend, Can you feel the scope, complexity, and significance of Viking contributions to European history, leaving a legacy that endures centuries later? As we enter the final segment of our journey into the world of Vikings, it is time to reflect on the profound and lasting influence they left on Europe and the wider world. Imagine standing on a Scandinavian shore centuries ago. Long ships ready to sail, communities bustling with craftsmen, farmers, and traders. The actions and choices of those people created ripples that extended far beyond their own lifetimes. Friend, can you picture how individual skill, courage, and ingenuity combined to create a legacy that still resonates today? Vikings were more than raiders. They were innovators in technology, navigation, trade, and governance. Their shipbuilding techniques allowed unprecedented exploration, connecting continents and enabling cultural exchange. Imagine observing the construction of a longship, each plank carefully selected and shaped, the keel perfectly balanced, the sails and oars designed for both speed and maneuverability. Friend, could you feel the meticulous craftsmanship and foresight required to build vessels capable of crossing oceans and rivers alike? Trade networks established by Vikings laid the foundations for modern commerce in many regions. From Scandinavia to the Middle East, from Western Europe to the edges of the North Atlantic, goods, ideas, and technologies moved rapidly. Imagine managing the logistics of transporting furs, silver, amber, and crafted goods across dangerous waters. Friend, ensuring that trade connections remained profitable and sustainable. Could you handle the complexity of coordinating commerce across vast distances with only rudimentary maps and tools? Viking influence is also visible in urban planning and architecture. Cities like Dublin, York, and Novgorod evolved from Viking settlements into thriving centers of culture, trade, and governance. Imagine walking through such cities today, friend, observing the street layouts, market structures, and fortified areas that reflect both Scandinavian and local influences. Can you feel how Viking settlement practices shaped the growth and organization of these urban centers for centuries? Cultural exchange enriched both Viking societies and those they encountered. Art, music, storytelling, and literature traveled alongside goods and people. Imagine listening to a skald recounting a saga of Odin and Thor in a town far from Scandinavia. Friend, blending local narrative elements with Norse myth. Could you sense the creativity and adaptability required to merge diverse cultural influences while preserving identity? Religion and spiritual life also played a key role in integration. Vikings often adapted their beliefs, combining Norse rituals with Christianity in ways that maintained continuity, while facilitating social and political cohesion. Imagine participating in ceremonies that honor both old and new traditions, friend, recognizing how faith can serve as a bridge across cultural differences. Could you navigate spiritual and cultural complexity with respect and awareness? Education and skill transmission were central to the Vikings' enduring impact. Apprentices learned navigation, craftsmanship, and leadership directly from experienced mentors. Imagine guiding a young apprentice in building a ship, forging a tool, or preparing for a trade voyage, friend, knowing that your instruction would shape the next generation's ability to thrive. Could you convey both technical knowledge and cultural values with clarity and care? Vikings' adaptability was remarkable. They modified technology, agriculture, and daily practices to suit local environments while maintaining core cultural elements. Imagine adjusting farming techniques to Icelandic soil or Greenlandic climate, friend, while ensuring that traditions, rituals, and social structures remained intact. Could you balance innovation and preservation to secure both survival and cultural continuity? Military strategy, diplomacy, and governance also left lasting marks. Viking leaders negotiated alliances, collected tribute, and sometimes ruled foreign territories, influencing political landscapes for generations. Imagine negotiating a treaty, managing tribute collection, or defending a settlement. Friend, balancing pragmatism, honor, and long-term objectives. Could you exercise such strategic thinking in complex, high-stakes scenarios? Vikings' maritime skill enabled not only trade and warfare, but also scientific observation and exploration. Knowledge of tides, wind patterns, animal behavior, and celestial navigation informed voyages and settlements. Imagine relying on subtle environmental cues to guide a fleet safely to new lands, friend, understanding that every decision had immediate consequences. Could you trust your observation, experience, and intuition to navigate such uncertainty? The spread of Norse language, legal concepts, and artistic motifs demonstrates the subtle but lasting influence of Viking culture. Words, place names, architectural elements, and decorative arts retain traces of their presence centuries later. Imagine exploring a modern city and recognizing streets, words, or monuments with roots in Viking culture. Friend, can you appreciate the quiet but enduring power of cultural diffusion through settlement, trade, and adaptation? Vikings also contributed to the shaping of European identity and historical memory. Sagas, archaeological remains, and historical records offer insight into social organization, values, and worldview. Imagine reading a saga or studying an artifact, friend, connecting with the thoughts, fears, and aspirations of people who lived 1,000 years ago. Could you see the universality of human creativity, resilience, and curiosity reflected in these stories and objects? Their influence reached far beyond Europe. Contacts with the Byzantine Empire, the Middle East, and North America demonstrate Vikings' role as global actors of their era. Imagine traversing the same rivers, seas, and trade routes, friend, observing how ideas, goods, and practices circulated across continents. Can you sense the scale and ambition of these explorations which connected distant societies long before modern globalization. Adaptation, resilience, and innovation were central to Viking success and legacy. Imagine managing settlements, fleets, and trade networks, friend, while navigating harsh environments, unfamiliar cultures, and strategic challenges. Could you sustain communities, ensure continuity of knowledge, and foster prosperity in such dynamic circumstances? In conclusion, the Vikings' contributions extend far beyond the stereotypes of raiders and warriors. They were explorers, traders, artisans, educators, and community builders. Their technology, navigation, art, governance, and cultural practices shaped societies, influenced commerce, and enriched cultural exchange. Imagine the cumulative impact of centuries of skill, courage, and innovation. Friend, realizing that each ship launched, each settlement founded, and each story told contributed to a legacy that continues to inspire today. And now, friend, as we conclude our journey through the fascinating world of Vikings, I want to thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed exploring history, imagining the sights and sounds of Viking life, and reflecting on their enduring influence, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this content to show your support, and share your thoughts in the comments. What part of Viking life impressed you the most? Which story or technology do you wish you could experience firsthand? Friend, I would love to hear your perspective and continue this conversation with you. Thank you again for being part of this journey. Remember, history is not just about the past. It's about understanding human creativity, resilience, and connection across time and space. Friend, carry this curiosity forward and keep exploring the stories that shaped our world. Until next time, fair winds and good fortune on all your journeys.